Hello, welcome back, or welcome if you're new to my channel. My name is Amanda, and I am a psychiatric survivor, and I'm an aspiring health coach. This is going to be the third of my deconversion from evangelical Christianity videos. I don't have enough time to take us further into the timeline of my deconstruction. I just wanted to capture a few thoughts that have been on my mind because I've done just more research and viewed a lot more content, and I'm absolutely convinced that the New Age to Jesus pipeline phenomenon of people, particularly young people, coming from practices of esoteric spirituality, let's say, into hardcore fundamentalist Christian beliefs is a very real phenomenon. And I want to kind of unpack it because I think that what lies beneath it are psychological issues in the population at large today that are very relevant to somebody who's interested in mental health and mental wellness content. Personally, I don't know how much of a career I'm going to make of becoming a health coach, although I'm very committed to finding certifications that help me support people in coming off of psychiatric drugs and giving them footholds in lifestyle practices that will help keep them from having symptoms and help keep them from having to go the course of pharmaceutical intervention ever again. So I want people to be healthier, and I want people to be more solid and resilient in the face of mental distress. So it's probably not a coincidence that the New Age to Jesus pipeline is happening at the same time that we are being told that there is a mental health crisis. Um, it's been reported widely in the media and talked about at length, although I don't think that it's been just talked about honestly. So, personally, I don't think we have a mental health crisis. I don't think that more and more people are mentally ill. I think we have allowed an industry, I call it the mental health industrial complex, of the providers of prescription drugs, as well as the providers of therapies, um, licensed clinicians of all kinds, all stripes, have proliferated ideas about mental illness, and to the point that the scope of what is considered illness has been expanded. And this, in turn, is leading to a feedback loop um, where people who have mental distress, because they are so saturated with this language and so already indoctrinated, they call it psychoeducation. That's what the pharmaceutical executives call it, psychoeducation. So this has gotten really out of hand, and to the point that I believe that it is literally generating more illness and more distress, particularly in young people. So my take on it, actually, honestly, I read a book called The Wellness Trap by Christy Harrison, and then I downloaded her other book, Anti-Diet. She's a very outspoken critic of wellness culture, holistic health, and I'm not going to say too much about the wellness trap. I like to sometimes really review and get into things immediately when they're still fresh in my mind. And then there are other books that I like to let marinate for a while so that I can have a more balanced judgment, because I will have strong feelings. Usually, with a book like this, it's I have strong feelings in agreement as well as strong feelings in disagreement. And I kind of need to come to a more moderate conclusion and a more cohesive message. So I did download Anti Diet, and here's my thing. I think I'm going to very, very much enjoy it. Not because I think I'm going to agree with her about diet culture, but because I think that my take about mental health and mental illness culture is actually very similar to her take about diet culture. She believes that we're just causing ourselves more harm, more psychological harm, and that diets do not work. And the more that the American public is pelted with ideas about nutrition and diets and losing weight, the more we're set up to fail. I kind of believe something similar about mental illness and the therapies attached to it. Now, what does that have to do with religion and spirituality? Bear with me a moment. So, basically, I've noticed, and I used to be way more forgiving of psychology and therapy than I am now, and I'm going to make more videos about where I fall on, does therapy have value? I think it has become an industry that exaggerates in order to maintain its relevance and um, get more cash flow. I do, I really do. And I feel that the media has been complicit in this. So that's why I don't think we have a mental health crisis, although these stats are real. The stats about, say, teenage girls and suicide attempts or cutting or eating disorders, there is a correlation with social media. But I feel like the mental health industrial complex, which includes psychotherapy and pharmaceuticals, and psychiatry, together has ended up in a place where it's creating false pathologies in order to provide false solutions in the form of medications or therapy. I believe that young people today are actually being induced into a state of disorder. I feel that we all think about them in ways that makes them act out scripts that we're giving them. So profound unhappiness snowballs into depressive states that are very real because we're giving them the scripts. We're inundating our schools with this culture. So I'm going to talk more about this, but a good resource, a book that I have not yet reviewed, but I read several months ago, is Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. Now, that was a book that I held off because there were some aspects of it that I found distasteful, but overall, I think Abigail Schreier's work is pretty sound. And I agree. And I understand why she wrote that book following Irreversible Damage, which is about the transgender phenomenon. And what the transgender phenomenon has in common with what I'm trying to get at is that that also is a fake problem that's being driven by the same industry. Therapists, doctors, the enlightened intellectual elite who manufacture the DSM-4, and the bureaucrats who work under them, frankly. So there's my big fat hot take to piss the rest of you off. So I'm sorry, I can't. I just cannot go down the road of intellectual dishonesty anymore when it comes to these topics. So Whoever is left, thanks for sticking in. But the parallel that I draw here is that this reminds me somewhat of my experience with Christianity. So, the mental health industrial complex manufactures fake pathologies in order to offer fake solutions in order to get the person hooked on the paradigm of mental health and illness and whatever expensive treatments come along with that. Okay. And it's very painful, and there's a lot of self stigma, and there's a lot of real pain behind it. Well, similarly, Christianity takes real pain from the human condition and works it up into a fake problem of original sin that it then offers a fairy tale story, a fantasy of a resurrected human being who's actually God, but not. It'll never make sense because it's not. It's just a bunch of words. It's a word salad, the Trinity, that's designed to throw your doubt, uh, like into your own eyes until you're just confused and you give up. Okay, that's not ever made sense to me. The doc is Jesus God? Is he a man? Is both at the same time? Is not a very acceptable explanation, and it never was. But at any rate, the whole story is about reflecting back to yet another story. And so the first story, the Garden of Eden supplies the problem and Jesus supplies the solution. And they're both fake. So I guess at this point in my life, I feel kind of dry and burnt out. And I'm middle aged, and like, is this common? So that's when I said in my previous video that I've been going through some shit. That's what I mean. Emotionally, this is what I'm going through. I watched a nearly 3 hour long testimony that I would say is it would be the perfect example of the New Age to Jesus pipeline person. Now, I was one of these people. That's why I'm doing this. I was part of this. This is my story. I'm seeing it happen again and again. I'm seeing echoes of it. Um, so I just don't see a lot of people sharing testimonies about coming out of this. A lot of deconstruction content creators actually grew up in this form of zealous, supernaturally, the spiritual warfare type Christianity that is becoming more and more popular, because when people are converting, that's what they're going towards, and there's reasons for that. So, another person whose work I admire is Jonathan Haidt. He's a sociologist. He wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, and I have not read his books, but I've watched a lot of his lectures and interviews, and what he's dealing with is why Gen Z seems particularly mentally fragile. So, to the extent that there is a mental health crisis affecting them, and the stats are alarming, he, along with Abigail Schreier, is one of these intellectuals who is unpacking what we are doing in our culture to create these conditions and why. Why are these people fragile? Why can they not go to college, solve problems, be adults? They don't seem to want to have relationships. They seem delayed. There's this emergent, delayed, prolonged adolescence. So somebody who's 20-year-old now is operating at the level of maturity that a 14-year-old from previous generation. They're just a little they're just a little fragile. But what I'm seeing is they're a big part of the New Age to Jesus pipeline. And I was myself like in my late 30s. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Gen Z thing, but my prediction is that Gen Z will feed this pipeline until it bursts. because they're being capitalized on by very clever content creators, and social media is going to propagate it. I think it's probably preferable to them, I don't know, overdosing, becoming addicted to drugs, committing suicide. But Jesus is not going to solve Gen Z and their problems. Jesus is not going to solve them. Okay. And because he does probably never existed. And the problem that I have in my life now is really missing being like that because of the psychological benefits that were conferred on me by having that cast of mind. But first, I want to talk, like I was watching this video by Tim Mills. He has this channel called Harmonic Atheist, and he talks about this one is called Escaping Christianity Makes Life Both Easier and Harder. Now, that is totally, totally true. In one of these testimonies, a girl described a demon being cast out and then wandering in dry places. And I was like, I feel like that's where I'm at. I'm wandering in dry places. And the reason why this is coming up for me now is because I'm exploring modalities like Reiki and yoga again, and thinking, what can I do going forward? And a lot of these things became taboo to me. So there's incredible fear that even though I'm intellectually not committed to anything in the Bible, there's incredible fear. So I'm sort of like, where do I go with that? And also I have a lot of frustration, honestly, because I want to be part of wellness and I want to have a career in wellness, that it is very difficult for me to find skill sets and modalities to commit to, because so much of holistic health, if you scratch the surface, underneath it, there's a belief in supernatural. There's a religion. There's some kind of activity going on, or a belief in the activity, that I think that my issue now isn't just with Christians. It isn't just with religious people. It isn't just with people of the book. It is with people who believe in the supernatural, and I have long, long, long not cared to be in the company of people who will say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Okay. I don't like to hear this because I think, great. Okay. I mean, I've been around a lot of the yoga types who get really deep into their, trust fund babies who get certified and then um, become insufferable. I mean, these people are insufferable, vegans, the moral, the ethical sanctimony. I'm not real. That's never really been my scene. That's never really been my crowd for very long. And similarly, I got into and out of evangelical Christianity in a very short period of time. I burned with enthusiasm. I was like a little sparkler. I wasn't, people tell the story of like the parable of the sower. I was a Christian for a season. That's what these people would say of me. And then I was like, whoop, this is too funky for me. I mean, I very quickly spiraled back down, and there are reasons for that. And I will discuss that. But for now, let's, talk about the kinds of people that this is affecting. I'm drawing on myself for the profile here. So I would say young-ish, impressionable, intellectually curious, uh, but also intellectually ungrounded. So unsophisticated or undeveloped in the sense that not usually having an advanced degree or a field that they're pursuing. Mostly women, the same demographic who's going to be a big consumer of self-help books, people who struggle with low self-esteem, people from a childhood where they have broken parental relationships and bonds that were not fully um help not whole, not advantageous, not healthy. Maybe struggling with addiction or having an addictive personality, prone already to belief in the supernatural, which is why many of them, I was never really that into any of these things. I kind of took everything with a grain of salt and like held it at arm's length. But they will get very, very obsessively into it because of this addictive type personality. So, what it is ultimately about that they think Jesus solves, but Jesus merely recreates, or it's Jesus becomes what appears to be a brand new road, a brand new solution. But in psychological terms, they're still doing the same old dance. They're still on the treadmill. And what it fundamentally boils down to is that if you start to practice, say, divination into then I've known people, friends of friends, who become so addicted to these new age practices that they can't really do anything or go out or make a decision without doing their pendulum or their cards or whatever their occult superstitious. People have become so psychotic in my social scene that they believe that they are an alien, that they are communicating with aliens, that they are from another planet, like just the whole weed, like the whole thing. I mean, the testimony that I watched that I think most epitomizes this phenomenon is a woman named on YouTube, Angela Marie Scafati, Heaven and Healing podcast. She very much typifies this new breed of ultra emotional, evangelical, charismatic, Bible thumping, whole hog Christian that I tried to be. And I have a lot in common with her. And this is the thing, I really like her. I like her. I think her channel is engaging. She is sincere. They are sincere. That was another thing, departing from this kind of community, both in person and online, that I'd created for myself. I mean, I really miss it. I miss it. I want to be like that. I remember being happy. Like they are happy. They have a contentedness in the dogma because it provides a certainty, a clarity, a lens through which they can see the world. And a lot of their problems appear to have been solved, but they're not, in my opinion. What I did was go into it and then come out of it and then have to really put myself back together again because I realized that I had just traded one form of dissociation for another. And belief in the supernatural, for whatever reason, wherever you're coming from, whatever paradigm you're using, whatever religion, belief in the supernatural can become a bad habit of a person with unresolved mental conflicts and wounds. And I think to the extent that they don't see that or they don't continue to grow in their self awareness and really heal those wounds, I think it can do a lot of damage. And I think merely having to enter into such an in-group dynamic can create a damage, because now you're creating a situation where one of my main problems was a lack of social bonds. So I invested in a way of thinking in the religion in order to gain those social bonds. And from having those social bonds, I was able to resolve or dissolve a very bad depression. But the problem is, I'd created a situation for myself where there was a condition that if I no longer believed the same way, I would suffer the lack of community and I would lose those social bonds and I would once again run the risk. So I had to really deal with what was underlying it. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you feel like this is happening to you, it's okay. You can slow down as long as you realize that what you're doing with evangelical Christianity is taking your locus of control and externalizing it. You're externalizing it. So no abuse victim doesn't have the struggle with the locus of control. So how much you think you are responsible for your own life and how much efficacy you have in the world, how much agency, how apt you are to self-regulate. People get very frustrated. Watch Angela Marie Scafati's testimony on Heaven and Healing podcast. Because when I say there is a pattern of somebody with an unhealed wound looking for ways to dissociate or looking for ways to close that wound in the supernatural, I mean, she was into everything. Reiki, starseed, astrology. So looking outside yourself, trying to find the magic bullet. And the magic bullet ended up being Jesus. But the point I'm trying to make is it's still an externalized locus of control. And it's a deception, right? They're always talking about the new age as a deception. It is. I don't believe in enlightenment. I think people are making a killing in terms of money that's being thrown at unproven bullshit, spiritual commodification. But at the end of the day, I'm concerned about these people. Richard Dawkins has a theory that mental illness is on the rise because we as a species are creating technology that changes our lives at such a rapid rate, and that rate that we're able to create life-altering technology is so much faster than we're able to evolve our brains to new stimuli or to new environments. So there's a disjuncture there between the rate of technological change and biological evolution within the mind itself, within the brain itself. It's not a theory that's actually unique to him. In some ways, it's the Unabomber's theory. A lot of people have touched on this over the years. I've looked into it because that was part of I wrote a book about mass shooters, and I was sort of looking at the Unabomber as an early prototype. So basically, I see that the more overwhelming life becomes because of technology, the more alienated we become because of things like social media and capitalism, the less valuable we feel, the more lonely we feel, If you look at Gen Z today, it's no wonder that they're resorting to age-old um, bullshit, really. I mean, like, there's no truth in it. Like, you're not gonna, because and the belief in for me too, like I wanted to have superpowers at one point. Like I thought maybe, I mean, I've had some experiences with Kundalini yoga, and I'm very frightened of the idea of like out of body experiences or clairvoyance or clairaudience or then I've had some experiences. I have a materialist explanation actually for the psychedelic effects. I believe that you can do nerve damage. I believe you can cause yourself to have neurological phenomena going on if you do this practice. I think in our, I'm getting off topic here, but I think in our spine there exists naturally DMT molecules. And so when people have a Kundalini awakening and they report a psychedelic experience, it is because they have manipulated their spine, moved it in such a way that they shot those DMT molecules up into their cerebral spinal fluid and it hit their brain. Okay, so I'm trying to be a materialist. I'm trying to learn things. I'm trying to go back towards practices that were that were demonized, literally demonized for me in order to approach things with a fresh mind and decide what has value. But I'm very, very, very annoyed and I'm very, very, very disappointed because it is the same old bullshit. Like I had Reiki done, and the woman before she did it invoked the archangels Azrael and Raphael, just a whole string of angels being invoked, which aggravated me because one of the things that I could not psychologically tolerate and that I think did the most damage to me when I was an evangelical Christian was the spiritual warfare talk. And I will make a video about my thought process and coming out of that. But I just became agitated. It agitates me that I cannot get like body work done with or look at exploring Reiki. And there's all of these supernatural aspects. I'm really interested in the human energy field. And scientifically, we know that the electromagnetic frequencies of a human heart are measurable for 3 feet away from the body. Okay, so that's actually a real thing. Okay, but it's kind of hard at this point to decide, well, how do I study these things with this standard, and do I waste my time, or am I being closed-minded? How do I decide what my standard is? So that's what I'm doing. But it is difficult for me to do that because there is a part of my brain now, that primitive part of my brain is the part that responded to evangelical ideas about angels, demons. Um, I think it's a very primitive, fear-based uh, system, and you can't just make it stop. You can't just make it go away. And once you are in it for long enough, it becomes part of your brain. So, at any rate, I was also thinking this week about the difference between sentiment and ethics. Okay, I had a difficult situation come up where I had a cat actually that I had to put down, and I didn't have to do it because she was terminally ill. She wasn't physically suffering, but she had behavioral problems that I could not manage or control anymore, and she was attacking me a lot, and it was becoming a health hazard. And I loved her a lot, and I know that she loved me, and I had to make the decision. I had to make decisions around it, and I ended up deciding that a behavioral they called it at the vet's office a behavioral euthanasia was the right thing to do and the best choice, ethically speaking, for the cat, for me, and for the human community in which I live was to have the animal put down. And was venting and talking to people in the lead up to this, and I got a number of differing perspectives. People have different, but I was hearing things um, around the issue of pet ownership that I realized this is a very sentimentally driven phenomenon, and I'm hearing things that are like pro cat, like don't put her down for any reason that I'm identifying as sentimentality. There comes a point at which you have to have ethics versus sentimentality. And unfortunately, when I look at the standards of the moral decision making standards of Christians, I see a lot of sentimentality that they think are ethics, but it's not. When I hear the testimony of someone like Angela Marie Scafati, I hear a charge of emotionalism that um, in this circumstance and in other similar circumstances, the pitch, the passion, the tearful passion is such that it evokes something in the listener, and then the listener mistakes the earnestness and the high sincerity for wisdom and truth. So this is a difficult road to walk. I don't walk this road without Christ, without religion, without a belief in the supernatural, and without spirituality in my life. Okay, because I see the spirituality that I've constantly wanted to cultivate in myself. I see a lot of psychological crutch. Like I see it now as a psychological crutch, and I'm trying actually to develop my mind and self-regulate, and I'm not seeing a lot of room for it, honestly. Um, Not because I will end up in these same old loops, exploring the same old bullshit. So it's hard, but it's been made easier by the fact that I'm in a relationship with a lifelong atheist materialist. Okay. I'm not a materialist, and I'm probably not an atheist, to tell you the truth. Um, However, we'll get more into what I actually believe. Right now, I just want to talk about what I don't believe and what I don't want to put up with in my life anymore because it's not helpful. But even if it were helpful, I wouldn't do it. I'm not trying to make decisions about these things about based on what is comfortable, what is helpful. I'm not in a mindset to say, well, that works, so I'll go with it. I'm not in a mindset to say being an atheist helps me protect my mental health, so I'm going to do that and call it the right choice. I'm only in a mindset right now, as of this moment, to explore things and decide what is true or not true, and to tell myself that I am old enough, mature enough, wise enough, and brave enough to deal with and accept what is true, even at cost. So if there's cost, and there's something within myself that I can change such that that cost can be made lighter, more bearable, then I will do that. But I am absolutely not going to hitch my mental wagon to this circus anymore. I will not. And I don't encourage people to abandon or adopt faith. I'm not trying to push people into or out of anything. But for me, I think for a long time, I believed that if Jesus would protect me from my mental illness, then I would never, then I was stuck with Jesus. But I think others in my situation, psychiatric survivors, might also feel the same way about any other kind of thing. Okay. I'm just saying, don't don't let it get you down to the point of desperation that you do what I do and you just flop over, and then anything can come into your life and become the dominant force. Okay. So it's a hard place to be, wandering in dry places. Okay. Um, but it's probably temporary, like life itself. And if I can do it, and if I can do it, you can do it. Okay. So another thing that I see in these testimonies that this is why I reference Jonathan Haidt, is I see this increasingly low threshold for what is considered trauma. I see a lot of young women and men complaining about like things that happen. So, for instance, elders are going to die. Angela Marie Scafati went deep into the New Age after she became depressed after her grandmother died. I know what that's like. I know how grief can get you. Grief got me there too. Grief got me to that place when my stepmother died. Okay. But no one in this day and age is really talking about things that happen um, as normal, natural adversities that are a part of life, in part because the mental health industrial complex has come in and cloaked all of our experiences in pathological language. And so what happens is you have young people who are, once they are triggered, once they are facing some kind of adversity, rather than it become a part of their story, it becomes, quote, a trigger to a pathological state. That is how they interpret their lives, and that is how they act out the scripts that we're giving them. So it's parallel, honestly. It's so different from religion, but it is a parallel phenomenon that we must be vigilant against. And that's all I'm going to say for now because I have to go. I'm very late. Okay. Bye. Over and out. Thanks so much.